second to load. Sorry, my laptop's a bit slow sometimes. Okay, I think we're fine now. Perfect. So my name is Anna McHale, and just like Jade and Kash, I'd say I am a final year student in the Bachelor of Science Psychology here in UL. So I'll be discussing my final year project as well. So it's entitled Loneliness, Social Support and Stress, and a Mediation Analysis in Undergraduates. So just to give you a quick overview of my presentation. So I'll basically be just talking about the rationale behind my study and what other studies have found, and then what my studies are specifically investigating. I'll be giving you a quick overview of my method and then the results of my study, and some possible explanations for my findings. Like Jade said as well, I'm actually kind of just in the process of figuring out my discussion and stuff. So it's kind of just things I'm kind of thinking of at the moment, and then some limitations of my study and implications for future research. So to start off, so I found loneliness in undergraduates. So moving to college actually finds that there's like a disintegration of important social structures in undergraduate students. So when you move away from family and friends that you have, you don't have a lot of social structures with your family, and you make new friends, so it developing new social structures. So this is often found to elicit feelings of loneliness in students. So this can be described here as a discrepancy between a desired and the achieved levels of social contact. And so we found in recent years, in the past decade or so, that loneliness has actually been continuously increasing in undergraduate students, and particularly accentuated during the COVID-19 pandemic as well. So the student wellbeing survey carried out in 2021 actually found that 90% of students that took part in the survey described feeling lonely, stressed, and feeling disconnected. So loneliness has been linked to physiological markers of stress and psychological markers of stress, which I've often found to influence poor academic performance, anxiety, and depression in students. So for my FYP, I focused on perceived stress. So this is described as the degree to which individuals consider situations in their life to be stressful. So it's not concerned with the physiological feelings, but more so how they identify with the stressful situation. So I based my study off the loneliness model. So this model basically depicts 3 different pathways that contribute to negative health outcomes that I mentioned previously. So one of the models that they focused on was stress, which I found to be particularly relevant to undergraduate students. So they found that lonely people were actually predisposed to perceive social interactions as negative. So this kind of in turn goes back into loneliness and makes them perceive themselves as more lonely. So it kind of it's called a self-reinforcing loop. And so this then contributes to stress and then the negative health outcomes mentioned. So with this, I found that perhaps in line with this model, that the students' perceptions of social support could actually explain the relationship between loneliness and stress. So the perceived social support, as mentioned here, it's how individuals perceive friends, family members, and others sources available to provide material, psychological, and overall support during times of need. So I found other studies actually investigated this model, but in different kind of ways. So the first model here on the left described how stress impacted loneliness through social support. So how social support explained the stress and loneliness relationship. But I found with the loneliness model, they kind of depicted that it's actually loneliness that influences social support. And also that stress actually impacts, or social support impacts stress rather than stress impacting social support. And then on the model on the right here, they actually took account of this and perceived that social support impacted stress, but in turn they actually described how social support impact loneliness, when in line with the loneliness model they actually depict that like lonely people are predisposed to perceive social support as negative. So it's actually the self-reinforcing loop that's producing this effect. And so I basically wanted to kind of take into account these methodological shortcomings and talk about how loneliness and stress could be predicted through social support. I also found that online social support actually hasn't really been looked into recently, especially during COVID times. Students have also experienced another shift in their social structures as in-person interactions were moved to online. Previous studies also found that online social support actually works in the same way as in-person social support. But studies analysing online social support actually kind of focus more on objective measures such as social media engagement or social media use, whereas I wanted to focus on how the psychological mechanisms of these interactions could have influenced the relationship. So leading on to my current study then, so I wanted to find out if loneliness is disadvantageous to stress because it lessens the perceptions of their social support, so what the loneliness model kind of explained there. So I had 4 mediators, so possible explanations of the loneliness and stress relationship, which were social support from friends, social support from family, social support from significant others, and then online social support as well. I also used age and gender as covariates as well, as previous studies kind of found that they were found to influence these relationships as well. So just to give you a brief overview of my method, I collected my own data. So I recruited 200 participants, which was then subsequently whittled down to 155 just due to incomplete data. So my age range ranged from 18 to 47, with the mean being 23. So I collected data online majorly, and this is through various platforms such as Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram, and those mentioned there. So my sample consisted of 23 males and 123 females. And then, so just to run through my procedure, participants were recruited through social media platforms, as mentioned. So they were brought to the Qualtrics page, so they were shown the information sheet, consent form, and then the demographic sheet. And so I basically measured age, gender, marital status, year of study, and then where they went to college as well. Oh, sorry. And so this all took about 15 minutes approximately, so it was quite a quick study online. Then moving on to what my results found. So I used a parallel pathway mediation model to test this. So it was through process on SPSS. And so what my study actually found was there was a few significant pathways here. So loneliness to my mediators, the loneliness to the 3 mediators, family, friends, and significant others were found to be significant. However, subsequently, these 3 measures were found to be insignificantly linked to stress, so they didn't predict stress in undergraduate students. And then my loneliness didn't predict online social support, but it did predict stress in turn. So with regard to the indirect effects, so each mediator by itself, as all the confidence intervals passed through 0, they were all found to be insignificant as well. So no one mediator actually was found to predict the relationship between loneliness and stress, which I didn't actually expect. But moving on to the possible explanations for this. So the stress buffering hypothesis actually maintains that social support is only advantageous or influences stress in high stress environments. So my sample actually only consisted of moderately stressed individuals. So I was kind of thinking that perhaps maybe because my sample only consisted of moderately stressed individuals, that it didn't actually capture an effect, so that possibly future research could account for this also. And then with regard to online social support, there's actually been, so the social compensation hypothesis actually maintains that online social support enhances in-person social support. So what I was thinking here is perhaps like a serial mediation model would be more suitable to test the relationships between online social support and perceived social support. So that, as found in my study, online social support was found to influence stress but not loneliness. So perhaps loneliness could predict stress through relational social support, which is then enhanced by online social support. And then also just an explanation. So my measures, I felt that my measures could have been more in depth. So I used the UCLA loneliness scale, but I only used the version 1, which was my own fault because I think I didn't research this enough before I picked my measures. So I could have used the new version of the UCLA loneliness scale. And then in regard to my social support measures, they could have been, as they measured like the various kind of relationships, it could be more in-depth, such as the instrumental, the emotional, or the esteem or social network aspects of social support.
Anna, sorry to interrupt you. You've got about 30 seconds left.
Okay, I'll go quickly. Sorry. And then limitations, so my design was cross-sectional, so it could have been longitudinal to account for like different variations of stress and loneliness. As I mentioned, my measures could be more suitable, my sample size could have been a bit larger, and online data collection was kind of biased towards people who use online studies. And then just for future research, other populations experiencing social reconfigurations in high stress environments could be investigated, such as immigrants and people experiencing bereavement or starting a new job, and then a longitudinal study to capture the influence or the variations of stress and loneliness, and then, as mentioned previously, a serial mediation model. And then, yeah, so just to run through everything I said there, so stress and loneliness are common in undergraduate experience. Social support has been found to be associated with both variables. And there was little research into online social support. So my model found that there was actually no significance, but possible explanations for this was the stress buffering hypothesis, the possible directions of causality, and my measures. And then my limitations consisted of cross-sectional design, my measures, online data collection, and my sample size. And then future research could focus on other high-stress environments, a longitudinal study, or a serial mediation. So that's everything now. So thank you for listening, and if anyone has any comments or questions, that'd be great.